Since the beginning of this year, we've been talking about how good readers think about their reading. When you're thinking about your reading, there's lots of things you can be thinking about. Sometimes you might be making a connection or visualizing or inferring. Today we're going to focus on making connections to the text. You use this strategy. Imagine Curtis is watching the news or reading a news article online and he sees a story about his old elementary school and its basketball team. Automatically, he returns in his mind to 3rd grade when he had to guard the giant, a boy who towered over him at 5'5". Curtis really can't stop himself. Our brain is wired to connect new information with old knowledge that's in the brain. It's our way of making sense of our environment. So schema is all the stuff that's already inside your head, like the places you've been, things you've done, books you've read. It's all the experiences you've had that make up who you are and what you know and believe to be true. That's a quote by Debbie Miller, and it's basically saying that your schema is your background knowledge. It's everything that's happened to you in your life. Brain research tells us that connecting to the text to your own experience allows you to understand it more. So when you're reading, when you ask yourself, what does this remind me of? You're going into your file folder in your brain and you're opening up that mental file where new information can be added to. Before you ever start reading, you should already be activating your schema or your background knowledge. So when you pick up a book and you read the title and you look at the picture, you think, what do I already know about this topic? To every text, a reader brings his or her personality, present mood, and memories, making each person's experience of text almost as unique as a fingerprint. Thinking about that quote, it's saying that each of us reads each text a little bit differently because we bring something different to the text. So when we read about a character doing something, we all react to that character's actions a little bit differently depending on our own experiences. Proficient learners connect rapidly with the text without even thinking about it. So for some of you, as you're reading, you're very naturally making connections. You might not even be meaning to do so. It just kind of happens. You're sticking new information in your short and long-term memory by hooking it on to some old information that's already in your brain. So with this strategy, it helps you because you're able to relate to characters. You're able to visualize when you picture what something looks like or a place that you've been before. It definitely helps you from keeping or getting bored when you read. It helps you listen to others, like you're wondering what are their stories or what is their perspective on what's happening in the text. And it helps you read actively and stay engaged with your reading so that you understand it better. There's 3 ways to connect to the text. You can make a text-to-self connection, a text-to-text connection, or a text-to-world connection. Let's talk about each of these a little bit more. When you use the strategy, you are thinking about what you're reading. So you want to make sure that you are thinking about your reading before reading, during reading, and after reading. So basically, we're always stopping and thinking and making connections. Reading is a dynamic process. It involves continuous thinking. Just like this line moving in the background is continuing, so should your thinking. When you make connections before, during, and after reading, it makes your comprehension or understanding of what you're reading more complete. We should all stop isolating information. The picture you see here is of some little boxes, and you can't really think, what I learn in social studies has to stay in the social studies box, or what I learn in science stays in that box, or what I learn in music or in theater stays in that box. Everything that we learn in all of our subjects can help us in other subjects. So you want to be able to connect what you're learning in one class with what you're learning in another. It helps you see the big picture and it helps you understand everything just a little bit more. You need to open your brain. Think about what you have in common with the text you're reading. Think about all your life experiences, what happens inside and outside the classroom. Even if you've not experienced an event or been to a location, you might have read a book about it or seen a movie about it. Those are all ways to make connections to the text. So a text-to-self connection. When you make this kind of connection, you're relating something in the book with something that's happened in your own life. You're going to ask yourself, what did I see? Or how did I feel? Or what does this text remind me of? Every time you make a connection, you want to ask yourself, how does my connection or my thinking help me understand what's happening in the story better? So, take a look at this text. My brother and I were playing around, bopping each other with pillows, when one slipped from my brother's grasp and smashed the glass coffee table. When you read that, you might wonder or be thinking about, did I ever have a fight with a relative? Did we break an object? What was it? How did the accident happen? How did an adult react? When you flesh out these prior experiences or you think about these prior experiences, it really helps you to see, hear, taste, touch, and then feel in a similar way to the people that were in the text. You need to stay focused. So you may want to say, I have a brother, and end your connection there. But you need to be more specific with your connection. Relate what's happening in the book to your own experience of breaking something or fighting with your brother, and think about how does it help me understand this experience in the text better. So some connections are more helpful than others in understanding the text. You want to make sure that you're making those good, meaningful connections that help you think about the text more deeply. Be a thoughtful reader. Remember that sometimes we make connections that aren't very relevant. These connections distract us from the text. So when you make a connection, make sure and ask yourself, does this connection help me understand the text better? A text-to-text connection is when you connect something in the book to another book, article, picture, or movie that you've seen before. So you're wondering and asking yourself, is something in this story the same as what I've seen before, or is something different? You're thinking about how you can compare and contrast the book you're reading now with another book or movie you've seen. And again, make sure and ask yourself that important question, how does this connection help me understand the new material that I'm reading? So think about what you already know. You already know a lot. So when you're reading a fictional story, you want to ask yourself, what literary elements do I expect? For example, we studied the plot, and you know that when you read fiction, it's going to start off by telling you about the characters and the setting, and then it's going to go into the conflict. You're going to expect dialogue between characters. You're going to expect some type of conflict or problem, whether it's man versus man, man versus self, man versus society. You know to expect these things when you read fictional text because you have schema for fictional text. In nonfiction, think about what you already know about that. What do you know about the topic? What do you know about how authors organize nonfiction information? What do you know about how to read those nonfiction features? All of that will help you understand the nonfiction text you're reading better. So you can make a connection with this. This is a text about a lion, and I'll just read the first paragraph. It says, living in the grasslands, scrub, and open woodlands of sub-Saharan Africa, the lion is the second largest cat in the world. It's dwarfed slightly by the tiger, which is closely related and has a very similar body type. So when you read that, you're thinking, what does this lion remind you of? Or maybe you're thinking about the movie The Lion King, or maybe you're thinking about the story or the movie of The Jungle Book. You're thinking about, is the lion in this picture and that they're describing here the same as one of the lions in The Lion King, or is it different? Think about books you've read as you read this text. The wizard looked up at the stars. Surely the lunar eclipse was a bad omen. He must tell the king quickly before the marriage ceremony began. What other story or movie that you've seen does this remind you of? Which words in that story caught your attention? Was it maybe the wizard, or the lunar eclipse, or the bad omen? Did any of those words remind you of a book or movie that you've seen? The story that I just read to you, do you think it was fiction or nonfiction? It was fiction, right? It was a story, a made-up story. So when we think about the genre that it's likely to be, it's probably going to be some type of fantasy because magical things are happening. So when we know we're reading a fantasy, we're thinking about those magical things happening, something very unrealistic is going to happen, things that could never happen in real life. There's usually some type of big conflict or problem, right? Think about other books that you've read that have a wizard in them or some type of astronomy. Making all of those connections will help you make good predictions and really help you understand this story better. You're going to compare and contrast. So you're going to think about how are the two stories different and how are they the same. The third type of connection is a text-to-world connection. When you make a text-to-world connection, you're thinking about specific facts that you know about the subject. It could be things that you've read or heard about in class, maybe something that you heard on the news or read in a newspaper, or maybe you just read it on the internet. As you read, you need to be a strategic reader. Make connections with the text. We can annotate to leave tracks of our thinking. This helps us make sure that we're understanding what we read. When we make a connection, we're going to say, this reminds me of when, and it helps me understand. That second part is key. You want to think about what the story reminds you of and how that connection helps you understand the story better. As we continue reading our stories, make sure you're making connections and thinking about how those connections help you understand what you're reading.